Did you get an idea? I got the press release recently on the potentially 4,000 non-citizen voters on Michigan rolls. Now, does the information that you had access to tell you that these are just non-citizens in general? I mean, are they actually illegal immigrants or just people over here on visas who thought they had to vote?
These were people that had driver's licenses that show up when you go one by one that are non-citizens, and then they were run through. To see if they had actually registered to vote or not. And what we found, and we've only been collecting this data for a few years, so we have a partial file. And when we ran that partial file, we found 963 were registered to vote. And so that would be about 4,000 altogether of non-citizens that are registered to vote just in Michigan. And I know someone tells me that, well, that's not that many. They said that's not that many, but if you remember, Joe Hune in 2002 won by 2 votes. He's a senator now, and that was out of 7,300 votes that were cast in a primary. Excuse me. 5 House seats in Michigan's primary last month were decided by fewer than 100 votes. And in a congressional race a couple years ago, it was decided by 15 votes. So every vote does count. We have a comprehensive project to try to get our qualified voter file accurate. And Pew Center on the states said in 2008 that Michigan had 102.54% of the eligible electorate registered to vote. So we signed a subscription with Social Security Administration, and we've removed 30,000 names that they've given us. They've given us 20,000 more, and now we'll get these updates regularly so we can keep up. We joined with 15 other states to check and see if people were registered in more than one state. We found 72,000 people that are registered in Michigan and another state. And we've also found that about 100 of them have voter history in both states at the same time. So all these issues we're working on, the non-citizen is just one more issue that we're working on.
Now, how do we compare to other states when it comes to this non-citizen voter issue? Why don't we see every state trying to determine, you say this stemmed from a federal rule until 2008 of people...
There are other states that are concerned about it. I saw on the news yesterday that Florida was able to get some names of non-citizens, but they're not allowed to remove them. They said it's too close to the election. Ken Densner, I've talked to him numerous times, and there are other states that have issues. The problem is it's really difficult to ascertain how bad the problem is. Luckily, we have collected that data for the last few years, so we were able to extrapolate, although very tediously, that that we probably have about 4,000 non-citizens registered to vote in Michigan. The federal government, I have to say, have been just a complete failure in trying to help rectify the situation, and that's one of the problems for people to even know. I wrote the Social Security Administration last year and asked them for their assistance when we had anecdotal information, and there was a Federal General Accounting Office report in 2005 that said that this was a problem nationally, having non-citizens on the voter rolls because of past practices. Social Security Administration refused to help me. I wrote a letter to Homeland Security. They refused to help me. I met in Washington, D.C. with Homeland Security in January. They said they'd get back with me. They still haven't. And I wrote a letter to the President asking for assistance. They have refused to help in any way, shape, or form, and it's so disappointing because, really, if you have to have people mark it, or you have the federal government help you so you can check to make sure that non-citizens aren't on the qualified voter file, obviously that's a far superior way. What we're trying to do is educate, because I believe most of the people that are registered to vote, it was a mistake, and it was based on this federal mandate that you must ask everybody, citizen or not, for decades, if they wanted to register to vote. It was good intentions because they didn't want it to be done so that anyone would ever be disenfranchised. They wanted every single person to be asked. And the effort really bad decision. It has these unintended consequences, and it's ironic now that they won't help us clean up our voter rolls. We're also trying to get as many people registered to vote as we can. We're doing a number of things. We have a mobile office that started in UP, coming now and going to universities and community centers. And I'll be going to Wayne State here in a few days to try to encourage people to register to vote. We send out a postcard to every 18-year-old. Happy birthday, but more importantly, please register to vote. Everyone that comes into our Secretary of State offices, our policy is that they're asked if they're not registered to vote when they come in for a driver's license or a personal identification. They're asked if they want to register to vote. It wasn't that many years ago. In 2007 and part of 2008, we had over 600,000 people that didn't have a driver's license or a personal ID. That's gone down to less than 45,000 now. And that's because some rules changed that said you couldn't be on an assistance program unless you had a driver's license or an ID and some other things. You really need an ID to even get your discount at Joann Fabrics or just about anything now. So we have a safety net, though, even though the law says you need to show your ID at the polls. If you do not have one, you still can vote. You just have to sign an affidavit of identity that says, I am who I say I am. So we're trying to make sure that we have the safety nets in, that we encourage people to register, and that we encourage people to vote.
Now, you've written a lot of letters. Has there been any thought about suing for the database like Florida did?
Interestingly enough, the article that I read yesterday was that Florida got some of the data, and yes, we have had some talks about that. I was hoping to get it done for this election, but it's obvious that the federal government's refusal and then dragging their feet, they don't plan on getting that to us. So we'll do whatever we have to do to get our qualified voter file cleaned up. It's only fair, it's constitutional, it follows the law, and if people are going to have faith in our system, we need to make sure we have a good qualified voter file. You think every time someone votes, whether it's because they voted in another state in this state, or if it's because they're a non-citizen, it really does cancel out a citizen of this state and this country's vote, and it's just plain wrong. In light of the fact that the federal government refuses to help and they're the only entity that has all the information, this is the backup plan it's an educational honor system. So we had people in February and May and August who came to vote that we had reports from communities that said, check the box, no, I'm not a citizen, and then the precinct worker said, well, you have to be a citizen, and they said, why? I've always voted. Most people, it's just an honest mistake. A couple people said, hey, I want to vote because I pay taxes here because I work here. Well, that's not the law. It's not the Constitution, and it's not appropriate. And it's illegal. It's a felony. And when they commit the felony, when it's an accident, it's really unfair to them because we asked them, we issued, they voted, and it's a felony, and the law says if you commit a felony, you cannot become a U.S. citizen. A lot of these people are on the path to citizenship. My father came from Canada to Michigan when he was young, and it took him over 25 years to apply for citizenship and go through what he needed to go through. It's not easy. The worst thing that can happen, like the gentleman from Indonesia, is you come here, you start a business, you have your family here, you're a jobs provider, and he goes to his last interview and they say, have you voted? And they do a spot check, I'm told. And he says yes, because in Indonesia you're compelled to by law, and he thought he was doing the right thing because we issued him a voter registration card. And they said, we're going to deport you. So he hired an attorney and has been working that because obviously he didn't try to violate the law. So we have to do something to make sure that these folks know that you must be a citizen because it harms them in ways that most of us can't even think of, that you've made this state your home. Your family's here, your business is here, your friends are here, and then you get the bad news. You voted. It's a felony. You can never become a U.S. citizen, and you may be deported. It's one of those things that's just common sense. And on those federal postcard ballot applications that we require our military to fill out, they have to fill in an oval that says, I'm a U.S. citizen, and sign it. And Candace Miller, when
Right. One last question for you here. Nationally, what do you think about the Kansas Secretary of State considering not putting Obama on the ballot because of questions about his birth certificate? Was that ever a concern for you?
Oh, I hadn't even heard about that. I mean, that's something that the federal government decides for Michigan, the way the law's written.